Hey, good afternoon. I'm uh, here with my father, Patrick Cohen Rose, and this is my oral history project for History 300 at Liberty University. We're here in Coburn, Virginia, which is in the southwest part of Virginia. And Dad, if just kind of get started, if you just kind of tell me a little bit about yourself, kind of where you grew up, your education, and kind of what you did, and as far as your professional life.
Well, I was born in 1932, and I grew up here in Southwest Virginia. As a little boy, I had total freedom to run up and down the rivers, and parents didn't look after their kids back in those days like they do now. They just kind of turned us loose in the morning and waited till we come back home to eat. That was about uh, the only time we was required to be home was to eat or supper. But anyway, growing up in Southwest Virginia was really a good thing because the people here were honest, and you didn't even have to lock up your house when you left. And well, then later on, I finished high school at Coburn, Virginia, and back then we didn't think about going to college. If you got a high school education, boy, that was really a good education. So, first thing I did, I got me a job in a little grocery store. With I worked there long enough to save up enough money to go to Detroit, Michigan. There wasn't any really good jobs around here, so about everybody was going to Detroit to get jobs in the automobile factories, and I did the same thing. I saved up $500, packed up my bag, and hitchhiked to Detroit. It took me 3 days to get up there. And when I got to Detroit, I was absolutely amazed at the size of the tall buildings there in Detroit. I hadn't seen anything like that before. So I spent the first day just wandering around in the city of Detroit, looking up at the sky at the top of the buildings. And I looked for me a place to live. I rented a room and bought me a newspaper, looked in them on ads, and there was plenty of jobs. So the first job I interviewed for I got it, Thompson Products, making parts for automobiles. I worked up there a little over a year, and they were drafting people to go into the Army. I didn't want to go into the Army, so I joined the Navy. And I spent a lot of time traveling all over the world when I was in the Navy. That was one of the best educations that I got, free of charge. Then after I got out of the Navy, somebody said, why don't you go to college on the GI Bill? Well, that sounded good to me. Didn't have anything else to do right at that time, so I went to Clinch Valley College. It was a 2-year college back then. I finished Clinch Valley College, went on down to NC State, and after 5 years of going to college, I had a Bachelor of Science degree in forestry. And that was one of the best things that I ever did, was to go to college. And I got out of college, and they were offering plenty of jobs. So I had to pick. pick what I wanted. So the first job I got was at the Virginia Division of Forestry. I worked there a couple of years, decided I wanted to come back to the mountains of Southwest Virginia, and I come back to the mountains of Southwest Virginia and got me a job working as forester for a large sawmill company. And I worked at that job buying logs for a sawmill for 8 years. Then I went back to graduate school at VPI, took economics. That's the worst thing I ever done is picking economics, so I didn't. After 1 year, I quit that and went back to work in forestry for Penn Virginia Corporation. I worked there until I retired. Okay.
Well, that's good. So, tell me a little bit about how our ancestors settled here in Southwest Virginia. You've told me some things before.
Well, my ancestors have been here in Southwest Virginia for a long time. Back before the Civil War, there was 3 brothers at Tocane, North Carolina. And I suppose they got tired of civilization moving in on them, and they come to Southwest Virginia and settled in a godforsaken part called Caney Creek. Samuel, Elijah, and Wilson Rose settled in Dickinson County on Caney Creek. From there, they married and had children, and now roses are scattered all over these mountains. That was on my father's side of the family. On my mother's side of the family, they come from England, and they also wound up in Southwest Virginia for some reason or other. And my father and mother met, and they lived here on this land that I'm living on right now. My grandmother lived here. My great-grandmother lived here. And there were 7 children in my family, and all of us at one time or another has lived here on this land. And me and my younger brother are the only 2 left, and I suppose we'll be here for a long time yet. And that's it. That's it.
All right. So, what was Grandma and Grandpa's name? What was
Your grandpa?
Yeah, your mom and dad.
Winfield Rose was my father, Sam's grandfather. Jessie Rose was Sam's grandmother.
And kind of what did they do as far as their professional lives?
What was that?
What did they do for a living?
Oh, my father was a coal miner. He went to work in the coal mine when he was 12 years old, Tom's Creek, Virginia. That's back when they loaded coal with a shovel. And he worked all of his younger days in the coal mine. And later in life, he went into the coal mining business for himself. And he didn't have to go back inside and under the ground anymore unless he wanted to. And he retired from coal mining, and he died with black lung disease. My mother she sure had her hands full raising 7 kids back in the 1930s and 40s, washing on a washboard, milking a cow, slopping a hog. Everything was hard labor for a housewife back in them days. But I can remember when we first got electricity, she was so tickled that she got a washing machine. Well, she got the washing machine, then after that a whole lot of other good little things come, like a refrigerator and electric stove. Whereas before she was cooking on a wood burning stove, she had to build a fire in the stove in the morning, then cook breakfast, then keep the fire burning in that stove all day long, heating water to wash with. But boy, it was easy living after she got the after she got the electric stove and the washing machine. But she was really a hard-working, a good Christian woman, and she lived and died here on Crab Orchard, in a place called Happy Holler. That's where we live now.
Yep. We just don't realize how good we've got it now compared to the way it used to be.
Electricity does everything for us now.
Yes, it does. So, tell me a little bit about your brothers and sisters. 'Cause
I'm kind of hard of hearing. I need some hearing aids. What was that again?
I said, tell me a little bit about your brothers and sisters.
Oh, I've got 4 brothers and 2 sisters. My two sisters had passed away. One of them long ago. Marian. She died when she was 40 years old. My older sister just died a couple of years ago, and she raised 5 boys living nearby, close by here. My older brother Richard, he was a coal miner all of his life. He went up through the ranks from loading coal by hand up to being a mine owner, and he retired from the coal mining business. My brother Burnett worked in the coal mine until he got hurt real bad. That top in the coal mine gave way and fell in on him. And he was crippled the rest of his life. But he lived to be 85 years old. And my other brother Donald, he worked in the coal mine. And he died while working in the coal mine. My younger brother is the only one left besides me, my brother Jerry. And he had sense enough to go to college and get an education. And he also like I did, got a Bachelor of Science degree in forestry, which is a good life, is living and working out in the forest. every day. Okay, that's about that.
So, and I'll ask you a little bit more about forestry a little bit in a minute. But so when you're born in 1932, or right in the middle of the Great Depression, kind of what was it like growing up as a young boy during that time?
Well, it was pretty easy on the kids because we didn't know any better. We really didn't have it hard because we were out footloose and fancy free running through the mountains while Dad and other people's dads were trying real hard to find a job for $1 a day. Even those jobs were hard to come by. People around here, they just kind of helped each other. Everybody had a garden. Everybody grew their own vegetables. Everybody had a hog to kill in the fall of the year. Everybody had a cow, so they had their milk and butter, and that hog for meat. And they canned everything that they could so they'd have something to eat in the wintertime. It was real hard because people just didn't have enough money to go to a doctor. And we, as a matter of fact, we only had one doctor for this total area around here. And people would pay him off sometimes with a bushel of potatoes or some other vegetables they'd grown on the farm, and that's the only way they were able to go to a doctor. I can remember going to the movies. We had a movie theater in Coburn. We'd walk to Coburn to go to the movies. My grandma would give me 6 eggs, and I'd take it to the movie, and I could get in the movie with 6 eggs. Other people would take other vegetables like 6 ears of corn or some potatoes. You go to the movies, we bartered to get in the theater, movie theater here in Coburn. Was that another part of that question?
That's good. So, well, and as you went through the 30s, and now you're getting into the 40s, being a teenager, how did you mentioned about some things that did change about as far as talking about your mom? You got the dishwasher and refrigerator. What were some other things that really changed for you and for your family as you're going into the 1940s?
Well, one of the first amazing things that happened when we got electricity. We got electricity, and I would get up on the bed and turn the light on and off, just and try to get a whipping for that sometimes. Then the telephone come. That was a great thing. We had party line back in those days. Everybody had the same telephone, so to speak. When you talked on the telephone, anybody could listen if wanted to. But radio, we'd been used to a battery radio through my childhood days, and Dad would only let us listen to the radio at certain times to keep from running the battery down. So when we got an electric radio, that was another great improvement. And that's, what was the rest? Sometimes my memory.
No, that's good. Just wanting to you're just asking you about how things changed for you and for the
Oh,
family.
yeah. One thing, and I remember that changed. My grandmother had an old horse called Bess here on the farm, and old Bess did all the hard work. I'd do the plowing with old Bess, pull the wagon with old Bess. One day, one early cold morning, this hard hand that my grandmother had, name was Jasper Hensley. Jasper was putting a harness on old Bess, and he was wanting me to watch him so I could learn. I was a little old boy playing around there, and I paying no attention to him. Jasper got mad and said, "One of these days, when you grow up, you're going to have to be putting this harness on this horse. You better learn." And, well, Jasper didn't know what kind of changes were going to take place in the next 20 years. We didn't need old Bess anymore. Put old Bess out to pasture. Go ahead.
All right. So you talked about going into the Navy. I went in the Navy myself because you were in the Navy, and just tell me a couple of experiences that you had in the Navy.
Great experience in the Navy. The first 2 years in the Navy I spent in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Boy, that was just like a paid vacation. I was a swimmer. When the seaplanes would come in, I would take a rope, tie it around my shoulders, swim out to the seaplane, hand the guy in the seaplane the rope. We had some wheels, flotation wheels. All he had to do was pull them wheels out to the seaplane, and they would snap on the side of the airplane. And then we had a bulldozer that was on rubber track. We'd pull that plane in on the beach, fuel it up or service it or whatever needed to be done to it. And we only had to do that. There wasn't that many seaplanes that landed there, maybe 4 or 5 a week. The rest of the time we could fish, swim, eat. Just a great life. Last 2 years I spent on a ship, on a destroyer, USS Isherwood. And traveled all over the Pacific Ocean, Boston, Massachusetts, down through the Panama Canal, up the west coast to San Diego, over to Hawaii, Philippines, China, Japan. And we could go on everywhere we went. We could go in and mingle with the native people, and it was right after. It wasn't very long after the World War II had ended. And people really were glad to see us. Even in Japan, they were glad to see us. But 4 years in the Navy, I decided that was enough Navy life for me. That's it.
That's got out of the Navy, and you went. I know you talked about going to Clinch Valley College, which is now the University of Virginia's College at Wise, and then you went on and got your degree in forestry at North Carolina State. What made you decide to go into forestry?
Well, I was going to go into anything other than coal mining after
Yeah.
after what it did to my brother and my daddy black lung and all that. And besides that, my mother and my grandmother threatened terrible things would happen to me if I went in the coal mine. They didn't want me in the coal mine. So when I finished my 2 years at Clinton Valley College, a real good friend of mine that I'd grown up with, Jack Sturgill, he had been doing some studying on NC State College Forestry School, which at that time, and maybe it is today, the best forestry school in the country. I decided to go into forestry school because I didn't know what else to do. I wanted to get a BS degree, and it looked like a pretty good way to get it. So I went down to NC State.
Okay. And I know you've lived in Southwest Virginia pretty much most of your life. You know, and I know you moved to Detroit for a time, and being in the Navy, you got to see other places. But what made you decide that Southwest Virginia was going to be your home, that you were going to live here?
Well, that's a funny thing. When I was 18 years old, in that age and time of my life, I swore I'd never live here in Southwest Virginia. I was going to go out and live in the big world, New York, Chicago, Detroit. When I tried Detroit and I tried Baltimore, and something just kept calling me to come back to Southwest Virginia, because this is where I grew up, this is where my roots were, and there really ain't no better place to live when you get right down to it. Sometimes I get kind of worried about strip mining tearing the place all to pieces, but even with strip mining, it's still a good place to live.
Yeah. I know strip mining has been it's really damaged a lot of the scenery and a lot of the land around here. You know, as you saw it happening more and more in the 60s, the 70s, and 80s, I mean, it's still going on. What have you thought about all of that?
Well, my being a forester and a conservationist, you know I don't like it. Mm-hmm. And of course, people that live here that have to work at strip mining to make a living, they don't like my opinion. But I can't understand why people would give up their good clean water and good clean mountain living. But then I'm not looking through their eyes. I guess they have their reasons for taking up for strip mining. But I've always been against it.
So, of course, we're in the house where I grew up, and I had a great childhood living here and living in Wise County and living in Coburn. And I know, of course, our ancestors have lived on this land. How did you come to have this, this land and live here?
Well, the reason I settled right here on this spot, I guess I was 6 years old. My grandmother and myself were. I helped her. I helped her work here. When even at that age, I helped her do mending the fences and things like that. And there's a big oak tree right out there now, right here in the front yard. That we were standing under that oak tree, and I looked out through the valley, and it looked so pretty there. At that time, there were only 1 or 2 houses that you could see, and it just looked like a wilderness area that I liked. And I told my grandmother I'd like to build a house right here beside this big oak tree. And she said, well, when you grow up, I'll give you some land. And she did. She gave me an acre and a half of land right here when I got out of the Navy. But I didn't do anything for a long time here about building. But later on, after I got married, I built a house here. And my 2 boys, Sam and Scott, they growed up right here. And it'd be mighty hard to leave, even though this house is getting too big. Don't need a big house like this when you get as old as me, because you don't have much company. Company's done gone. But that's the way I ended up right on this spot.
And it was great living here. Great to grow up on this land and in this home. So, well, this concludes my oral history interview with my dad, Patrick Rose, and I'd like to thank you, Dad, for sitting down with me and letting me ask you some questions. Thank you very much.